Let me take you back to the year 1965, an era when prisons weren't just places of confinement, but shadows of forgotten horrors. This is a true account from that very time, passed down through my family. The man at the heart of it was my grandfather. A man, like many in that era, who had a past, one that caught up with him and led to his arrest. Whatever the crime was, it landed him in prison, and not just any prison, but one that history seems to have quietly buried. It was a cramped, suffocating place, overfilled with convicts. Among the prisoners were those serving long sentences, some awaiting trial, and a few who were destined for the noose, men on death row. It was in this condemned section that my grandfather was placed, crammed in with the damned. One of the inmates among the condemned was a man known as a Tantric, a practitioner of dark, spiritual rituals. He'd been sentenced to death after being convicted of the murder of a little girl. His claim? He hadn't meant to kill her. He was trying to cure her through spiritual means. The villagers, however, weren't so forgiving. Her parents handed him over to the authorities without mercy. His execution was scheduled just 2 weeks after my grandfather arrived at that prison. The first week passed without much incident. But then something changed. The Tantric stopped eating. He fell gravely ill, by choice it seemed. He grew weaker with each passing day. In the haze of his deterioration, he began to carve strange marks on the wall of his cell using his own blood. He'd slit his hand open against the rough cement and, with trembling fingers, began scribbling unintelligible words. Words no one could understand. Alongside the script were bizarre symbols, cryptic diagrams that seemed ancient and threatening. No one could tell what they meant, but something about them made the air feel heavier. And then, one day before his scheduled execution, he died. Just like that. But his death didn't bring peace to that prison. Far from it. What followed was a series of events that no one could have foreseen. That very night, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the condemned cell, the one where the Tantric had died. The other convicts, terrified beyond reason, began howling and banging against the bars. They shouted for the guards, demanding to be let out. When officers arrived and questioned them, the prisoners were pale and shaking. They all said the same thing. They had seen the shadow of an old man, wandering silently within their cell. And behind him, a smaller shadow, a child, no taller than 3 or 4 years old, was trailing him. The guards dismissed it. They claimed it was just the prisoners' nerves. A trick of the mind. They warned them not to incite panic and walked away. But the next night, the screaming came again, only louder. This time, not only were the shadows back, but the unmistakable sound of a child crying could be heard, soft at first, then rising to a weeping wail that seemed to seep through the stone walls. The convicts refused to stay another night in that cell. The prison officers had no choice. The death row inmates were moved into the general cell block, an already overcrowded space that now held even more tension than before. My grandfather, a practical man with little patience for superstition, told the authorities that he didn't believe in ghosts. He insisted he'd be fine in that condemned cell. And so, they allowed him to return. A few other inmates, equally skeptical or perhaps just desperate for space, joined him. That night, everything was still. Until it wasn't. My grandfather awoke in the middle of the night with a strange sensation, like someone was watching him. He opened his eyes, and there it was. The shadow of the old man, standing silently in the cell. No body. No form. Just the unmistakable silhouette of a figure. And in the far corner, barely visible in the darkness, the shadow of a little girl crying softly. Frozen with fear, he couldn't move. Not a finger. He blinked, trying to shake himself free of whatever held him, but in that next instant, the old man's shadow was no longer standing, it was sitting on his chest. And then it began to choke him. My grandfather couldn't scream. He couldn't fight. He gasped for air, clawing at an invisible force. It wasn't until he began desperately whispering prayers, calling on God, that he blacked out. He came to later, shaken awake by the others in the cell. But they were screaming too, terrified. Each one claimed to have seen the same thing. And before the shadow disappeared, it had whispered something chilling into each of their ears. "Come on, go away, if you don't, I'll kill you." After that, none of them wanted to stay another night. The officers moved them out of the condemned cell once more. But the hauntings didn't stop. Each night, from that same cell, the guards and prisoners would hear it, the roar of an old man, full of rage and pain, followed by the mournful crying of a child. Time passed. More convicts came. The jail became even more crowded. With pressure mounting, the authorities needed to reclaim that cursed cell. And so, they brought in painters to cover the symbols and writings on the wall, the ones the Tantric had scrawled before his death. But no matter how many times they painted over the writings, the symbols would reappear. The walls seemed to push the paint away, revealing the original markings again and again. And then, the whispers began. The painters heard it first. A voice. Quiet. Hoarse. Don't erase these writings and pictures with paint. Otherwise, things will get worse for you. Go away. Panic took over. The workers abandoned the job, refusing to return. Desperate, the prison authorities brought in a powerful Tantric, someone reputed to have dealt with darker forces before. The man listened carefully to the reports, examined the room, and finally said he could cleanse the space. But he'd need two things: soil from the original Tantric's grave, and a human skull. The prison arranged both. That night, the Tantric entered the condemned cell alone. He told the guards not to disturb him. That he would perform the ritual in solitude. Morning came. The guards approached the cell. What they found was unspeakable. The Tantric's body had been torn apart. His head was positioned against one wall, his arms, placed on another, his feet, across from them, his torso was missing entirely. But beside the severed head was a message, written in thick, congealed blood. This cell is mine and not for anyone else. That was the final straw. The prison authorities had the cell permanently sealed off. No one was ever placed in it again. And yet, even now on certain moonless nights, the prison guards say they can still hear it, an old man's furious roar echoing from behind that sealed door, and the quiet, pitiful crying of a small girl, trapped in time.